All video game developers will sooner or later move over to open world games, and with Ghostwire Tokyo it was Tango Gameworks' turn. I have good memories of Evil Within 1 and 2, which was the studio's previous games. The games were certainly flawed, but with the gaming industry being as it is, you need to learn to be happy with what you get. Point is that I had my eyes on Ghostwire Tokyo, but I didn't buy it at launch. I have a strong recollection of sitting together with my dude bro gaming bros and saying that I didn't fully get what the game was about, but I would try it out when it was cheaper. Turns out that it got cheaper really fast, and now I am ready to report what Ghostwire Tokyo is all about. The game is set in Tokyo, where a group of shady magicians spirit away the entire population and traps the city inside a strange fog. Angry spirits and other supernatural entities take over the city, and the only one left to do anything about it is Akito, who got possessed by the spirit KK. The game's setting is big on Japanese folklore, but as a man of culture, I have watched plenty of anime, so I managed to keep up with it. The setting is nice, and I like the concept of running around in an empty city battling spirits. Sadly, the story is thin and quite disappointing. The antagonist is weak. The few existing side characters are weak, and very little of interest actually happens. The two protagonists aren't that strong either, but at the very least they get enough screen time for the player to care about them. The narrative is just weak and can be summarized into two guys running around an empty city doing busy work to become more powerful to battle a villain of the weak bad guy. The pacing is thankfully quite high, and the quality of the presentation saves it to some extent.
お前の連れか？ああ、仲良くしてやってくれよ。仕方ねえな。遊んでやる。
The voice acting is good, and the cutscenes are really nice. The game's presentation outside the cutscenes are uneven though. The city that the game presents is impressive in its size and variety. The game's focus on ray tracing pays off to some extent, and it can look really nice with all the different lightning effects. The lightning is overdone though, and like in many ray tracing games, everything is just too reflective and it ends up looking weird. There is also still a lot of static reflections all over the place. The player character don't show up in reflections either, and what is even worse is that all your flashy particle-based attacks don't light up the environment properly. I am not going to pretend to know the details of how they have configured the ray tracing, but I do know that when I am in a dark basement throwing magical bright colored attacks around, then it should look cool, but it looks like shit. And while it certainly can look cool with a bunch of streetlights being reflected in a puddle, I must question how much I care when much more important lighting is not being handled better. The performance is also pretty poor on my man-child PC. Add to that some less good textures and you have a presentation that is not always top-notch. But the city does look good, so the presentation is certainly uneven. Which finally brings us over to the gameplay. This game is nothing like The Evil Within. If the Evil Within games were action-oriented survival horror games, then Ghostwire Tokyo is an open-world first-person shooter. Considering its setting, you could expect some scares.
It's spooky.
But that rarely happens, and Ghostwire leans more on action than on horror. While the combat might look weird, it really is not. You have 3 main weapons, green, blue and yellow, also known as gun, shotgun and grenade launcher. And if you concentrate fire on an enemy, then you can finish them off with a special attack. So the animations might look interesting, but it is really just a very basic FPS combat system. It is too basic actually. The weapon variety is awful. The enemy variety is also really poor, and since most of them are melee fighters, most fights will just be you backing up and blowing them away. Since you are a lot more mobile than the enemies, this is also way too easy. It works alright, and I don't hate it, but it is lackluster. Add to that poor boss fights, boring encounter design, and few levels outside the open world, and you have a combat which is not all that impressive. Same can be said about the exploration of the city. There is very little here in terms of dynamic open world gameplay, and the main path here is to find collectibles to get experience and different kinds of bonuses. These collectibles are then scattered across the city and can be found in alleys or on the top of buildings. There are no vehicles here, but besides running you can grapple to certain fixed points. and then you have a magical glide to move between buildings. A lot of time will be spent exploring the city, and in a genre where games struggle to come up with the most fun movement options, I don't think Ghostwire comes out on top. Again, this is fine, but it is hardly impressive. Besides this, there are some side quests that you can pick up, but they aren't that exciting. There are shops where you can buy clothes and food, and of course there is a skill system. This is all fine, but nothing more than that. Reading this review, I feel that I come off as being more negative than I really feel. This is often the case for me, but Ghostwire Tokyo is a game where most elements are pretty basic, and I have a hard time not being negative when going through them. But it is also not a bad game. I did not have to force myself to play through this game, which is a pretty good sign for me. The setting is nice, the city is cool, and everything works alright, and it feels like a complete and coherent game. It was relaxing to explore the city and look for collectibles, and even though I did a fair amount of side content, I could still beat it in around 20 hours, which is a reasonable length for this type of game. It has a bunch of problems, but it is still a unique game that I enjoyed to some extent. I don't regret playing it, and to me that's a big thing. So if you are looking for a first-person open-world game and find the setting interesting, then I could certainly recommend it. Just don't expect too much.